I want to talk about the grammar of Daniel chapter 9, verses 26 and 27 especially, to find out who the he is in verse 27, who confirms a covenant and causes sacrifice to be cut off. After the 62 weeks, it says in verse 26, Messiah shall be cut off, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, desolations are determined. We need to identify the main subject and the clause. The primary subject introduced at the beginning of verse 26 is the Messiah. The first complete clause is Messiah shall be cut off. That's the central action tied to the timeline. And number two, we need to recognize the secondary or inserted clauses. After that main clause, the verse introduces additional information. The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. The end thereof shall be with a flood. Desolations are determined. These function as added or subordinate developments, not a replacement of the original subject. Grammatically, they're additional statements, but they do not overturn or redefine the primary subject already established. Now, here's a key observation. The phrase, the prince that shall come, is embedded inside a prepositional structure, the people of the prince. So the acting subject in that clause is actually the people, not the prince himself. And then when we transition into verse 27, look at the opening. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. The question is, who is he? The grammatical rule at work is that in normal grammatical flow, a pronoun refers back to the nearest clear dominant subject that has been established, unless the text explicitly introduces a new subject. Now here's the options. It's either the Messiah, which is a clear primary subject of the passage, or the prince, who's mentioned indirectly inside a modifying phrase, not acting as the subject of the sentence at all. The nearest independent primary subject is still the Messiah of verse 26, because he's the one directly tied to the prophetic timeline. He's introduced with a clear verb and an action, and the prince is not acting independently in verse 26, but is part of a descriptive phrase about the people. So why is he referring back to the Messiah? Grammatically and contextually, the passage begins with Messiah as the central figure. The prophecy is about what happens within the 70 weeks. The covenant language fits Messiah's role, not an unnamed future leader. The prince is not acting subject in verse 26, so it's weak as an antecedent for the he. So the flow reads naturally as the Messiah is introduced. Additional elements are mentioned alongside. The narrative returns to the main subject with he in verse 27. Here's the summary in simple terms. Verse 26 establishes the Messiah as the main subject. Other events are mentioned afterward, including the destruction of the city by the people of a coming prince. But those are side developments. Verse 27 begins with he. It follows the normal grammatical pattern of referring back to the primary subject already in focus, which is the Messiah. Side issues are mentioned, but the pronoun in verse 27 refers back to the main subject in verse 26.